Howdy doody, everybody.
Howdy doody. I'm Dr. Lee, this is Dr. Diana. We are doctors, but we have to say that we are not your doctors,
Definitely
and
not your doctor.
this is not meant to treat, diagnose, or prevent any illnesses. So if you have any questions regarding your health, please seek your own healthcare professional advice. So I did a lot of research after our last interview on the topic that I casually brought up, which was the importance of being bored and not doom scrolling. And it turns out that my intuition is based on actual science, which I later found out. So you're wrong and I'm right, haha. What do you have to say about that?
Well, tell me more about what you learned.
All right, so before I tell you about what I learned, well, as a part of what I learned, you have to know that there's kind of 3 networks in your brain.
Well, let's do a recap of what you said last time that makes you right and me wrong.
Okay, so last time I said that I feel like I'm doom scrolling a lot, and I also work a lot. So in between work, I'm doom scrolling, and after work, I'm doom scrolling. And I started to feel like there's no time during the day where my mind is quiet and reflecting. It's always constantly focus, 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 and then doom scroll, doom scroll, doom scroll until the day's gone and it's time for me to go to bed, and I feel like I've not had any time to myself.
So, what did you say that you were right and I was wrong?
Well, you said that you feel like it's not a big deal, that you even think it's a good thing to connect yourself with other people via their short form content. And I think that's where you and I fundamentally disagree. And I think the science leans my way. Let's just say that.
What does the science say?
All right, so now we talk about the 3 networks in the brain.
Why?
Because to understand the science, you have to understand the 3 networks in the brain.
Okay.
So without going into too heavy of neurology and physiology, I think you should just know that there are 3 networks in the brain. One is called the executive control network, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's executive control, so your brain is actively in control of what you're doing, focused on the task at hand. Like if you're learning, if you're working, or doing anything with intent, your executive control network is in control. And then when your brain is quote unquote idle, your default mode network actually turns on. So people used to think that when you're not doing anything, your brain kind of goes quiet and goes blank, but that's not actually true. So there's this network called the default mode network that helps with processing the information that you've learned, the memories that you've learned, and organizes the information into a digestible and useful set of data for long-term storage. And also at the same time, it uses the information that you learn to then help you reflect on yourself, who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and so what, and what's in the future for yourself. So the future-oriented thinking and planning comes from the default mode network, whereas the executive control network is more of a focus on the present and focus on the things that you're doing right now without regard to the past or the future, basically. And then there's the salient network, and to my understanding, the salient network is just kind of like the toggle switch that decides which network your brain is primarily in. So if your brain is in the executive control network, it's going to shut down and suppress the default mode network. When your brain is in the default mode network, it's going to shut down and suppress the executive control network. So it's kind of like vice versa kind of thing. Yeah, so to understand my argument and my intuition, you have to understand how the brain works. And that's the current prevailing theory of how the brain actually organizes information and functional tasks.
Okay, so why should anyone care?
Well, I think you should care if you value your well-being. So when I describe the inability to feel bored, like not giving myself the opportunity to feel bored, feeling bored is when the default mode network actually kicks in. So you have to have a balance between when your executive control network is working and when your default mode network is working. Otherwise, either if your default mode network is on all the time, you're not focused on what you're doing, and you're just daydreaming all the time, and you're not being productive. You're not learning anything, you know. And vice versa, if your default mode network is never on and you're always in the executive control network, so if you're working, and by the way, when you browse short form content and doom scroll, you're not actually in the default mode network. So I should mention that, right? So when you're working, when you're learning, you're in the executive control network. And it turns out when you're doom scrolling and looking at short form, like watching TV, you're still in the executive control network. So it's just low effort, but you're still in that executive control network mode where you're not processing the sense of self, you're not processing your experience in space and time.
So it sounds like you're telling us that you think people would benefit from spending more time in the default mode network. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's my theory, is that people today spend too little time in the default mode network, aka being bored and not doing anything, not actively engaging your brain in something. Because we always think like, oh, if I have some downtime, I should go do some of this. Like go do a little bit of journaling, go do a little bit of reading, or fill in the time gap without letting ourselves just truly try to go idle and process the information that we've just experienced.
So you're saying that people today generally spend more time in, what did you call it, the executive function network?
Executive control network.
Executive control network.
Yeah, and that's why everyone feels so tired. Everyone feels burned out.
Okay.
Everyone feels anxious and depressed about their jobs and their lives, even though objectively we live in one of the greatest nations on earth and we have a lot of liberties and a lot of privileges that we have here. But people feel angry, upset, and a lot of it comes from the content that they're consuming. But a lot of it also is, I think, not spending enough time allowing themselves to be bored and spending time in a default mode network.
Well, like for me growing up, a lot of rhetoric that I was comparing myself to was like hustle culture and being productive.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was idle, there would be sort of a voice in the back of my head saying you're useless because you're not doing anything and you're not making something of yourself right now. So even like being idle, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, there's a sense of like discomfort that's there.
Yeah.
Whether it's a sense of like, oh my gosh, I'm worthless if I'm not doing something, and or something else that other people might feel. I think something really interesting is like this World Cup recently exposed me more to Norwegian culture. Shout out Erling Haaland. And from what I've learned, I don't know if it's completely true or not, but it seems like Norwegian culture values idle time, or at least like engage with nature time, and things like free play, especially for kids, and for adults even. And I think there's probably more, like it's probably more accepted for people in other cultures to be idle, and you're expected to be able to be idle.
Yeah, so I want to address what you said. When you felt idle as a kid, you had that toxic subconscious voice telling you that you're worthless because you're not being productive, that's not a healthy default mode network.
Oh, I know.
That's what most people experience, and that's what induces the anxiety, induces the stress, so that when you're in default mode network, you're supposed to be relaxing, you're supposed to be processing. It may be uncomfortable slightly, but it should not be like, oh my God, I actively cannot face my default mode network, which is what most people probably feel these days. It's like when I was in residency, I think the first time I've ever had looking back, I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, the first time I've ever had a toxic default mode network pop up was when I was working 12 to 14 hours a day. And because I was so afraid of making a mistake, I was constantly 100% engaged at work. I wasn't doom scrolling at the time, but I was leaving no time for downtime. There was no idle time. I didn't take 10, 15 minutes to just do nothing, to eat lunch even. I never ate lunch, right? Like, I was known for not eating at work. Nobody ever saw me eat. And it's because I was afraid that if I took time to do anything else besides work, then I'm going to miss something and patients are going to be harmed. So anyway, after those days, I would go home. I would be so tired at the end of the day. I would think that, I'm just going to fall asleep the moment my head hits the pillow. But that never happens. So instead, the opposite happens. I lie down, and then my mind just starts going 500 miles an hour the moment I close my eyes, and everything starts to replay. And that was my toxic, unhealthy default mode network kicking in at the end of the day, driving up my anxiety, driving up stress, and not allowing me to eventually relax. I would go to sleep stressed, and then that would continue for pretty much the entirety of the 3 years of residency, so that it actually cemented my sleep habits of stressful sleep. And it becomes a vicious cycle too. Wow, that train is loud. It becomes a vicious cycle too, where the less well I slept, the harder my workday got. And then the harder my workday got, the worse my default mode network was when I got home and tried to sleep and relax. So in retrospect, I realized that, that makes a lot of sense how that happened. I think if I was, and to bring up to kind of compare and contrast, people in China, they may work the same long hours, but they have the culture of taking breaks. Every once in a while, they take like 5 to 10 minutes to just not do anything. And that's why they're able to...
I think the smoke break is like a socially sanctioned time to take your mind off things. Yeah, like
when you're smoking, your executive control network is not locked in. You're smoking, you're stressed, but you're in the default mode network and processing. So smoke breaks are actually
good for
potentially
you.
Beneficial. I mean, smoking is not. I do not endorse smoking whatsoever, but
it protects you from Crohn's disease.
Taking that break, Whereas if you don't, then your memory starts to go bad. My memory was terrible during residency because my brain was never in the default mode network long enough to consolidate my memories. So nowadays I'm terrible at remembering people's names. And the experts out there actually say, like, people who doom scroll a lot, just constantly working your brain in the executive control network, they get digital dementia. So then they may not be working, they may just be lying in bed on their days off during the weekend, doom scrolling the entire day, but actually they're not relaxing.
There is a really weird feeling of productivity when you're doom scrolling.
Yeah, so the way that happens is, first of all, it's not even like watching TV, because when you're watching TV, you at least have some sort of congruent message that you're following, right? It's not constant dopamine hits. Whereas when you're doom scrolling, I would say probably at least 1 out of 2 of those short form content is meant to induce some form of dopamine, to reward that part of your brain for discovering and watching for the next 10-15 seconds. And then you move on to the next completely unrelated subject, 10-15 seconds. Then move on to the next completely unrelated subject, 10-15 seconds. So not only is it destroying your brain's like work reward system, it's also destroying your attention span because you're constantly switching. You're not even focusing on one thing for longer than 15 seconds. So it destroys your attention span while it lowers that that threshold of your brain needing dopamine. So nothing feels interesting anymore. People stop wanting to read. People stop wanting to go out and talk to other people because that's not as the effort of doing those things are too high relative to short form content. And then the reward that you get, the dopamine that you get, is not as high as the short form content potentially. So then you default to the short form content. So there's just a cascade of things that it's almost like just a double whammy, like the short form content itself promotes this bad habit of, it's almost like gambling. You're just pulling the slot machine over and over again to see what you're getting. And with each dopamine hit, you're hooked more and more. And then your attention span gets slowly degraded to the point where you can't remember anything because your default mode network never kicks in to process. To have the default mode network kick in, to be bored, it takes a good 10-15 minutes to happen. But we're not doing that anywhere near enough. So I think it's kind of like my public service announcement that if you don't want to lose your sense of yourself, which is, essentially death of self, then maybe consider putting down the phone more and more. So since last week, I've reduced my doom scrolling by a lot. Every time I get the urge to doom scroll, I maybe look at 1 to 2 reels and I immediately force myself to stop. I just put down my phone and I actually try to, if I'm lying in bed, fine. I go lie in bed and let my default mode network take over. Bye, train. Yeah! He did it. Yeah, he waved at me and he did it. Awesome.
I love it when the train conductors do that.
Give that man a raise. I mean, it is entirely free for them to do, and it just makes your day.
I wonder if kids these days even know that that's a thing.
I don't think so.
I don't even know how I know that's a thing.
We need to teach kids. Kids, if you're watching...
When you see a train do this.
Just gesture this, and there's a good chance that they'll honk their horn for you.
Man, I feel like I learned that from watching like TV or movies or something.
I think the first time I did that with you was when we were in Elmhurst.
Yeah, that was fun.
Anyway, so that was my sort of education that I went down and into the rabbit hole and learned from our discussion last week, because it very much so has to do with the sense. You lose your sense of meaning, you lose the sense of yourself. So like, you're living your life, you're going on to live your life that way. It's not as meaningful as it would be if you spent that time either just meditating on what happened that day, or if you're not planning to do anything that day, go out and make more meaningful connections with people, or read a book, or something that takes more effort. You have to consciously do something that takes more effort, even though the feeling of rewards might be lower initially. I think eventually the rewards get higher and higher the more you do it. And
did you guys have fun? Was it fun out there? Nice.
Yeah.
So what difference did you notice in the past week for yourself?
I felt bored more often, and I felt like I was more interested in, well, first of all, I put a lot of energy towards, instead of doom scrolling, I put a lot of energy towards learning about this phenomenon, how the ECN and the DMN kind of interact with each other. I've really put a lot of time towards learning how that relates to me feeling bored, and how that relates to anxiety, depression, and just the general sense of losing oneself, And I think the eureka moment was when I saw that 5-minute YouTube video on that, I think, Harvard professor or something, who talks about like being bored is actually good for you. And then that's where the inspiration for today's.
Being bored's actually pretty fun. Like, I mean, I associated with feeling sad a lot as a kid, but it's also where a lot of my daydreams came from.
Yeah, because if you don't daydream, you don't innovate. You don't inspire yourself. You're kind of consuming other people's content, and your mind is becoming a slave to other people's messages. So then people who want you afraid, you're going to be afraid. People who want you depressed about, how Trump is running the country, you're going to be depressed. Right? You're accepting their message, and you're not even allowing your brain to.
Where's your own voice?
Yeah, you're not even allowing your brain to really process whether that message actually aligns with you or not. So then, at the end of the day, when you doom scroll for 3-4 hours in a row, you try to sleep. Suddenly, all that doom scrolling is going to try to flood back into your brain. And how does your brain even?
Well, it's also, I noticed,
compile
like,
that?
a lot more people to end up comparing yourself to throughout the
Oh my
day.
God, yeah. It's like
Which is very
everyone else's
stressful for
life is
me.
better than mine. And that might be ultimately the message that your brain stores at the end of the day when you're going to sleep, is that everyone else is just having more fun than me.
And then I become very marketable and controllable.
And we have to ask ourselves, why is such an addictive technology being just so unregulated and being encouraged even? Like, there's so many people out there. They don't want to brainwash you. Their plan was not to brainwash you, but they want to just make money for themselves, and so they make short form content. But when you take the short form content as an aggregate, as a whole, it's just very addictive stuff that ultimately it feels like high reward, but we're cheating ourselves because the rewards are not lasting. The rewards are entirely empty. You don't even remember the next day what you watched the day before. Right? It's not like learning. It's not even like watching TV where you're following a drama and you can remember what you saw the day before. For the most part, when you doom scroll, you don't remember 99% of the stuff that you doom scroll.
Only Holland memes.
Yeah, only Holland memes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm kind of impressed at myself for coming up with that, just intuitively deciding that, and then retrospectively validating it with science that people have done.
Look, it's a product of your own boredom where you investigate yourself and you notice things.
And I think for what it's worth, the neuroscientists and the experts out there are warning people that this is a phenomenon that's happening, but not in effective media.
Well, it makes me wonder, like, for young people like us, and especially the younger ones even, like, well, how can we come back together again in some form of cohesive community? Like, being out here in the Hudson Valley in these little small towns when we go out to eat, or just like even at the park, like I see friends hanging out with each other, people are out fishing. I came out to play soccer today by myself, but still came out. And like, people are talking to each other and hanging out and spending time, and it's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And
that guy's over there fishing and doom scrolling on his phone. I just whatever, at least he's out here fishing, I guess.
But yeah, like, I think it'd be really nice to maximize more of this, like, communal stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think not enough people come out and actually meet other people and talk to other people these days. For every one person we see here at the landing, there's probably 1,000 people just at home doom scrolling.
Yeah, I highly recommend talking to randos. I love talking to randos. Like, yesterday we talked to the chef at the restaurant that we went to, and he had these posters out on his restaurant saying that he was serving this thing called pinza, which is a variation of pizza that was actually developed in ancient Rome back in the day. And instead of just using wheat flour, they use a mix of wheat, rice, and soy flour to make the dough. And it pours out as a batter very similar to focaccia, and it has a lot of similarities to that. And I was like talking to the guy, and I was like, why did you decide to put this on your menu? Like, I just became very curious about why that was a decision that he made. And then that led to us like finding out like where he was from, like Puglia, the heel of the boot in Italy, and how they like to go to Italy like every so often. And like just talking to random people is always so much more fun than doom scrolling.
Yeah, because doom scrolling feels good in the moment, but then afterwards you feel completely empty.
Yeah.
And if I can say so myself, you feel worse
Yeah.
for having wasted your time.
My friend today reached out because she knows that I do like, or I used to do like kung fu and like qigong, and I'm like very in touch with my Chinese roots. She asked if I wanted to lead a qigong like session at a qigong tea/coffee rave. And that was so exciting. Like just the thought of doing that. I was like, wow, like real people coming together to have fun, doing healthy things. You know, like qigong is a very grounding practice that connects you to yourself and the world just by nature of the kind of activity that it is. And I was like, ooh, I have my Chinese tea set that you guys all saw in the last video, and I'd love to share tea and like sit at a table with people drinking tea. That would be so much fun. And then you could have your little corner where you're like talking about things like this with people. And then whoever the DJ is can like play their little ambient music, and the person who loves making artisanal coffee can be in their little booth making artisanal coffee. And then suddenly you have this awesome party. And like that's what we're creating now, just from an idea.
Well, that sounds to me like a whole lot of meaning making, right? And meaning making is what gives our life
Meaning?
meaning.
Yeah, like
But
this
it's
sort
what
of
makes life worth living.
It's so nice to like engross yourself in something. There's a sense of self-discovery, and then you're like invited to share that with people. That sounds so fun to me. And I haven't really had many opportunities to do that. So when my friend thought of me and reached out today, I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually part of my like life's dream, is to get together and engage in like meaningful and fun, nourishing activities, and to also hang out and do nothing." You know, like to me, that is the epitome of cool. That seems really freaking cool to me. So yeah, I'm excited. And like both of us, like we're very much in a stage of like searching for meaning and reconnecting with ourselves and our emotions and everything.
Who's both of us? Me and you, or
Me
you
and that friend. I don't know.
friend?
Are you?
No, I definitely am.
Okay,
Otherwise,
then
I
all
wouldn't be
three of
making
us
videos
are.
like this.
Yeah.
And you know what? If nothing else, if the science itself, if just not doom scrolling being good for your brain, if that's not good enough, then there's the other thing that I think about is I'm giving people free money to take over my brain. Like when giving attention to other people's like short form content, I'm literally giving them free money. And when I think about that, I'm like, why aren't people giving me free money?
Watch our videos, he says.
No, but that's for me. I'm just like, you know, that would be another motivator for me to not engage with it's basically junk food for your brain.
Well, there's so much to be interested by. There's so much to be interested in. Like, I find myself incredibly interesting. I can have never-ending dialogues with myself and to look at all these different things in different perspectives. I could spend an entire day by myself and just learn so much from talking to myself. And then the inside and the outside world are not really so separate, but there are activities that you can engage in. Like when I play soccer/football, like there are things that I learn and that I experience that are then like so fun, and I get main character energy when I'm doing them because I'm the one that's like trying it, experiencing it, and everything, instead of me watching somebody else do things through a screen. And it's so much more satisfying, and it feels so much more enriching. And like
Yeah.
when I do pottery and I'm like, doing things with my own hands and the trial and error, when I make ice cream, and whether it's like the best ice cream I've ever had or whether I mess up that particular batch, like I have never felt such joy until recently failing at something, when I messed up my ice cream and when I poked a hole in the bottom of my bowl during pottery, because I felt like the main character in a book trying at something and learning. And like growing up reading a lot of books and growing up like watching a lot of videos and doom scrolling and watching other people on the internet, I started being like, oh, why can't I like feel like the main character? Why am I always watching other people do things?
Yeah, so that's a great point that you bring up. So that would be the third reason, right? When you're doom scrolling, when you're looking at other people's stuff, they're the main characters. They're having fun, and you're witnessing them having fun. But you're like, there's in my opinion, a false sense of connection there. But they don't care about you.
Well, the most you get is like this parasocial relationship that inevitably they're all trying to sell you something.
Yeah, and then like it fizzles out the moment you kind of scroll past,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And it just feels very like not just empty, but like you feel the sense of like disenchantment. Yeah, you feel disenchanted, disillusioned.
But everyone like inherently is so interesting. And the perspectives that you have and the experiences that you have as the main character of your own life are so interesting. Like, I want to know about you. And it's hard to know about you if that person has just been doom scrolling or hasn't really sat with themselves for a long time. Like, there's this very popular saying that like you can only meet someone as deeply as they've met themselves or as deeply as you've met yourself. And I definitely experienced that. For people who have like spent a lot of time with themselves and talked to themselves a lot, felt a lot of their emotions and like lived through a lot of experiences, meeting these people, like I feel so connected to them like immediately. A lot of times more so than the people who I spend objectively more time with, but maybe haven't gotten that deep in relationship with themselves.
That just reminded me of how Charlie Munger was like, I don't need to go back and meet anyone. I don't need to have lunch with any dead people because I met them all already. Because he would read their books. And I would say the only people who successfully write books that get published far and wide are people that truly have had those experiences that you were talking about.
Yeah, like you
they
sit
learn
down, you
about
contend
themselves.
with yourself, and you build that relationship, and then to
And how do you
even
do that if you're not in the default mode network? That's my whole point.
I don't know.
Yeah. So default mode network is kind of like the meditation. There's definitely ways for the default mode network to break on you, which I think a lot of people's default mode network today is broken. And that is why so many people are on antipsychotics, antidepressants, and also why people are using psychedelics more and more and more.
Psychedelics, huh?
Yeah. So psychedelics is very powerful. And what psychedelics do is kind of soften up the default mode network. So if your default mode network is broken, softening it up is actually a good idea so you can form new ideas and new directions.
Well, how do you know if your default mode network is broken?
Well, if you're unhappy with your life, that's a very telling sign to begin with. Yeah. But
Seems
for
simple
me,
enough.
I would say for me, I didn't even realize that my default mode network was broken because I was kind of brute forcing work as a resident, and I was sort of just like brushing everything under the rug and basically going about like, oh, I'll deal with it whenever that comes up someday.
And then he met me and we did deal with it.
Yeah. So I think for me, I can't even pretend like psilocybin was not something that was a key part in awaking my consciousness, like my being conscious of these issues. I think psilocybin had a large part to play in that.
Partaken in legally.
Yes. So when my default mode network melted away, I started processing all sorts of things that, and it's not all bad, it's actually a lot of good. Like I remembered memories of my childhood that were very enjoyable. And it was, like being reminded of who I once was. My sense of self came back. So I would say my default mode network rebuilt after the psilocybin experience, rebuilt much better in a much positive direction, more constructive way than it was operating before, because
So,
I suppressed it for years up until that point.
so was it your feeling unhappy and knowing that you felt unhappy that led you to be open to having this legal psilocybin experience?
I no, I think I was just going along for the ride, and I didn't know any of this beforehand. Like I didn't know the default mode. I didn't know anything. I didn't even consider myself to be depressed or anxious or anything. I was like, oh, other people have anxiety and depression, but not me.
Yeah.
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 But that's what happens when you're anxious and you're depressed. You have poor insight into your own situation.
Oftentimes, yeah.
You can still appreciate how other people are anxious and depressed, but you don't think that you are.
Well, I think also
But I very
in
much
like
was.
in our highly productive American society, the more anxious and depressed you are, the more controllable you are as a worker bee. So it sort of like serves the corporations when you're in that state.
Yeah, it keeps you in a constant state of fear of
Yeah.
losing your job, right?
Yeah. And by default, when you're in that state, you also choose to give up your agency, you know?
And you know what that makes you feel like? I feel like the worst feeling was the feeling of never being good enough.
Yeah.
Because my default mode network was so broken, it was constantly telling me that like I needed to do more. Like, what did I miss with my patients? What did I do wrong that day? It didn't look at the bright side. It was not looking at the bright side. It was storing all this like negative stuff over time. So that's how I ended up where I was, and that's why psychedelics and specifically psilocybin was so profound for me, especially the very first time, that it kind of made me do a 180. Like, wow, I woke up, I was like, wow, the light came back.
And it was really nice to meet you with your light back on.
Yeah.
I always knew he was in there.
I think that you don't necessarily need something like psychedelics to reach that state, but it's hard. It's hard for someone who's stuck with a broken default mode network to talk their way out of it, or to have anybody talk them out of it. That would be hard.
Well, because oh, the moon is really pretty right now. Like, talk therapy or like being spoken to does not incite an ability to imagine beyond what your status quo is.
Yeah. But I also think that a lot of people aren't yet aware of the issue and the pathology
Like
that's
the
happening.
issue of feeling unhappy with your life for,
Yeah, like,
for XYZ
and then
reason.
connecting it to a sick default mode network, like a broken and sick default mode network. I don't think a lot of people are connecting to that yet. But I think we'll see, how prevalent dementia becomes
Oh my god, I feel it.
for the younger generation today.
I feel
Like
it creeping up on me.
what percentage of the current young generation will end up with dementia. I think my educated guess would be the proportion would be much higher because of chronic prefrontal cortex fatigue leading to poor suppression of fear,
That's why there's
anxiety.
like a strong overlap between an like older people depression and dementia, and they say that
Right.
like a lot of times depression manifests as
The
dementia.
people I think who are demented are usually the ones that their family members tell me, oh my God, they were so high functioning. They were like businessmen and things like that, wildly successful. But I wonder, their dementia, if it's related at all to the executive control network and the DMN, if it's related to that system at all, their dementia probably stemmed from them voluntarily engaging in high functioning activity in their work all the time.
I think also probably a component of wanting to forget things too.
Maybe.
Like if you don't have many happy memories,
That's a fish.
why would you want to remember them?
Yeah.
You know?
But nowadays, I think even people who aren't doing those jobs, who aren't wildly successful businessmen, who aren't under that kind of pressure, they're putting themselves at risk for dementia too with doom scrolling and short form content.
So come out and play football/soccer with me. Let's have qigong tea parties. Get together with your friends.
Well, it sounds like everyone watching is now unofficially invited to the Qigong tea party.
Tea party. Have one of your own.
Yeah, that will happen somewhere in New York. So if you're interested, drop me a line. We can talk.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. I don't know when or where yet, but we would love to have you.
Only if you're not weird. But
Okay,
even if
well,
you're a
don't
little
say-
weird, that's
don't-
okay
don't-
too.
Everyone's weird. We're all odd. We're all odd.
Only if you're not like a murderer or a criminal.
Well, just don't murder us.
It's very selfish of you. Just don't murder us. You
Well,
murder
I mean,
other
I can't
people.
control what you do, but my request is that you don't murder us.
Anyway, joking aside, do you actually want people to come out and hang out?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, well, there you have it. There's your unofficial invitation.
Hudson Valley air is so fresh. It's beautiful, isn't it? You guys, I don't know if you can see, but there are like boats behind us. People hanging out, people fishing. The moon is beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's caught anything yet.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
I really would love to remember more of my own life. I would really love that. And like the standout moments that I remember are the ones where I go like, wow. Which are usually when I feel like a spark of magic or when I feel like really connected to people and myself. Gosh, this is so beautiful. This is one of our last summer days in the Hudson Valley.
That's true. We're leaving the Hudson Valley next year.
All right. Thanks for hanging out.
Peace out. Be well.